Basically, I want to start with just the principles. The principles by what I believe to be the principles that are should be kind of unchanging as far as designing a program go. We've talked about principles versus methods before. In the analogy that I always kind of fall back on is like in church, you had in some of the older school churches, you'll have choirs, with the hymnals and all that kind of stuff. And then in a church like Life Point or New Life, you have bands, you have worship bands. At the end of the day, the principle behind it is the same. It's all worship through music, but the method that you convey that with is different. And as long as the principle behind it is sound, the method really shouldn't matter. I think there may be some methods that are a little more effective than others, but as long as the principles are solid, what you're doing should work. And so from a programming standpoint, I believe there are 5 principles that we need to adhere to in order to make sure that the program itself is solid. And I feel like as long as you don't violate these principles, the program will work. The first, I'll line all out here for you. The first one is just quality. Over quantity. Second one is specificity. Third one is individualization. The fourth one is variation. And the fifth one, and I really believe that this one is kind of this one drives everything else, is progressive overload. And so I feel like as long as when you're putting together a program, as long as you don't violate any of these 5 principles with your program, the program should be effective. The first one, the quality over quantity. I'm going to have to write bigger if I want them to actually see any of what's on here. The quality over quantity, I think that one's kind of self-explanatory. When you're looking at Joy, for instance, today was doing that one-handed squat with the single-arm kettlebell. And the move that you made last week, bumping her down to that 35, I think that was the right move at the time, just to make sure that the quality was good. Because what was happening, because she's holding the bell off center, when she was squatting down, her hips were shifting underneath of it. Her body was trying to get more of her underneath of that load to stabilize it, and as a result, she wasn't squatting as well as you would like her to. So what I did today with her was I just added the band back in. Forced her to really kind of open her hips up, and it made her stay a little bit more square. And the other thing I allowed her to do was just kind of support up in here, more so on the right side or on the left side than the right, because it wasn't necessarily. I didn't think that where that was driving from was down here in her hips. I thought what you saw in her hips was a compensation for her to get under that load to support it better. So I allowed her to put this hand up underneath here on that left side to support it. And I think the combination of that and the band cleared it up. Now, watching her do that, you could see just a little bit of lateral shift. But the minute her hips would start to move, her body would correct. And that's okay. It's okay to see those kind of corrections. It's kind of like in a balance exercise. If you see a little bit of wobble, that means that their body is doing what it's supposed to, because their proprioceptors are telling her, okay, I'm here over my center of base, or my center of support rather. I'm shifting too far out. I got to correct and come back. And as long as that's happening, then the system is working. And so what we saw with Joy today was with those two little changes, she would get out of line a little bit, and then her body would respond and pull her back into play. And so and the whole purpose of that was rather than just saying, suck it up and keep going, it's, you know, it's okay. We wanted to focus on this. And had those two things not worked, had she still continued to shift, we would have dropped the weight back down, or maybe you give her another exercise completely, let her bring the load back into center to make sure that that quality is where it's supposed to be. So that's the first one. And that one, you guys have heard me talk about that. I feel like that should be specific, especially to us given our population. In a younger population that bounces back and recovers a little bit easier, you might be able to get away with that for a short period of time. The problem is that's not sustainable. And that's, I've said this a couple